are in listen-only mode.
Hello, welcome everybody to today's webinar. Today we're going to be talking all about remote support and how to really optimise your remote support tools. I'm going to be joined today by our guest presenter, Scott Walker. He's Senior Solutions Engineer at Bomgar. Bomgar are our partners for today's webinar, so a big thank you goes to them and obviously to Scott for presenting today, who I should have on the line with me now. Hi, Scott.
Hi, Zoe.
Thanks for joining us today.
No problem at all, my pleasure.
Excellent. And I know you're going to be sharing some of your top tips around remote support. So I'm really looking forward to that. I think, am I right in thinking that this is an area that, can prove tricky for organisations to get right, essentially?
It can be, yeah. What a lot of organisations do is try to jump in both feet first, and we're going to try and break that down, give people some ideas and some takeaways that they can implement slowly and ultimately end up in a much better position.
Amazing. That sounds really good. And actually, everyone listening, please don't forget to post your questions for Scott. You can throw those onto the control panel anytime you think of them during the session, and we'll come to those right at the end. So I guess I'll hand straight over to you, Scott, to share your tips with us, and I'll speak to you at the end. Thank you.
Thanks, Zoe. Hi guys, thanks so much for having me to talk to you today. So just by way of introduction, and as the holding slide that you're looking at suggests, so my name is Scott Walker and I'm one of the Senior Solutions Engineers at Bomgar. It is with great pleasure actually that I get to talk to you guys about remote support and what it can mean to each and every organisation, how you can maximise an investment in remote support, and hopefully the goal is to leave you with some takeaway tips and ideas to make a positive change to the current support processes that you guys are already heavily invested in today. The reason why I enjoy talking about remote support so much is dead simple. I worked in supporting roles for many years before joining Bomgar, so I completely sympathise with the challenges and, more importantly, the impact that a successful support team and process has on a business. The content itself, however, I really can't take credit for. I really must thank Bomgar's 15,000 customers who take great pride in their solution and how it benefits their businesses day to day. These fantastic customers really have shaped the content and the stories that I'm delivering today. So for the benefit of everyone, really, we're going to be talking around the challenges, and then we're going to do our absolute best to try and solve these together with various different ideas and tips and tricks that we've got documented in the presentation that we're happy to share. So who is Bomgar and what do we do? So Bomgar has prided itself on providing secure access solutions to its customers for the past 15 years in over 70 countries around the globe. And our mission is dead simple. It's to continue to provide a best-in-class portfolio of solutions for the market so that people and devices can be productive and, more importantly, secure at the same time. We provide really three high-level use cases with secure access solutions which are focused on users and systems and connecting those two together. Today, we're going to concentrate completely on the left-hand side, with some aspects falling into secure and defend. But ultimately, support and service is the concept and the idea of connecting people and devices together, okay? Every different business, every organization has some form of IT service, whether that's in the form of a help desk or customer service, IT operations, or just general IT as a whole. So we're going to concentrate solely on that today. Some of those key elements, however, absolutely fall into our privileged identity management solution, and that's all around securing and defending passwords associated with privileged accounts. So how we tie that back to the help desk is ultimately, representatives, support engineers, IT, they have the keys to the kingdom, the passwords associated with these privileged accounts that ultimately allow them to connect to devices and fix them and maintain them going forward. We then on the right hand side have our access and protect. So this is the idea of a privileged user within the system that can absolutely be represented by someone on the help desk, how they can connect to systems and infrastructure that provide a solid foundation for a business to run on. And all of those three provide a best-in-class portfolio of solutions. But today, again, like I've said, we're going to concentrate on support and service. Now, one thing I would say is, although highlighted in the content that we're going to deliver, we have lots of ideas, we also have to understand that careful planning, procedures need to be put in place, appropriate training needs to be carried out, and all of this information with all of those things will lead to a successful journey through leveraging remote support beyond just screen sharing. And that's ultimately what I want you guys to take away from today's session, is that we can look at remote support, and if we adopt the business processes and fundamental concepts within this presentation, remote support can be way more than just a screen sharing tool. And what we're going to start, and what I thought would be the best area is, why do people start looking at a remote support solution like Bomgar to begin with? And actually it highlighted consolidation for me as one of the key areas that I wanted to focus on in point one, or tip one of the presentation. If I think back to when I first started in support, we had different types of devices. It was when organizations started to use mobile devices within their organization, and we had multiple tools to perform multiple jobs. If I wanted to connect to a Windows system, I would use a remote support solution. If I needed to connect to a Mac, I would use a solution specific for Mac operating system. If I needed to connect to a mobile device, I couldn't in some cases, or I'd maybe use an MDM type solution and use some of the features and functionality for that. But actually, when time has evolved and we've moved forward from that, what we have now with tools like Bomgar is the ability to consolidate all of those different things into one tool, and that naturally is going to have benefits to an organization, both from a productivity perspective, from a cost perspective, and from a security perspective as well, and that's represented in multiple ways. Shadow IT is a real challenge for organizations today. It's hard enough for security teams and for IT teams to create a baseline of security principles and using one tool that does many things, in this case remote support. So if we have to use different solutions, the overall concept is that we have to implement multiple tools, and that can be challenging moving forward. So shrinking the tools that we use becomes much more cost effective. That when we are asking for budgets internally and we're looking to leverage different investments, we want to avoid additional costs. We want to avoid multiple maintenance purchases moving forward and consolidate that down into one simple process. And ultimately training on one tool. I often remember each and every month we would be trained on a different solution, which is great. We get exposure to multiple things and that helps us grow. But ultimately within the support department, we want to focus on one thing and one thing only, and that is help solving customer challenges or end user challenges with their devices. So training on one tool becomes a really positive way of moving forward. You become an expert in that single area and that single focus. I didn't want to have to be the guy who brought up GDPR today, but often it's with remote support. With remote support, it's often something that's forgotten about, especially when we consider, organizations, members who are on the line today who are perhaps looking at customer-facing support. We want audit trails. We need to capture customer information. I'm thinking in higher education, there could be student IDs. For customer support, it might be usernames and email addresses, these kinds of things. So GDPR becomes, a huge conversation. It applies to everybody. Who is supporting European business divisions. So we have to think about the types of information we capture, how we secure who has access to that information, and ultimately be able to provide that if requested by an end user. We also have, different policies and procedures that a business or an organization mandates, or a baseline of security frameworks that they work from. So, that's represented on this slide here by PCI DSS, which is the payment card industry data security standards. So, if you're a customer, you're working in retail, there is a foundation of concepts and principles and frameworks from a security perspective that you need to work from. And that absolutely applies to remote support solutions as well. So by simply implementing a secure remote support solution such as Bomgar, you're actually securing quite challenging quite challenging key areas for the business to work from and be able to do that in a safe and controlled way. There are also directives within Europe now, which for organizations who are providing critical services to society have to abide by certain laws, and that's represented on the slide by the Network and Information Security Directive. So there are key elements of that which you're going to see on the next slide, which absolutely fall into remote support. So by simply implementing a remote support solution that puts ticks in all of these different compliance mandates and keeping the security teams happy, solves a challenge that for me allows people who primarily work within the supporting roles and departments, they want their focus to not be on security. They just want to put a tick in that box and move on to their day-to-day tasks, which is supporting their end users, their devices, and ultimately optimizing the help desk moving forward. Security is becoming a huge conversation in every organization. That is not a historic thing, I would say, but it's something that we absolutely welcome at Bomgar. Introduce the security teams into your remote support solution deployment and ideas. The security teams are not there to put barriers in place, but they are there to make recommendations on how to implement solution and how to make life easy moving forward. And that also then impacts on the productivity, the things that you can think about day to day. So the idea of being able to set granular role-based permissions. Now, for me, when I log into a solution, I don't want to have every feature and functionality enabled. I just want to have the key features that are there for me to do my day-to-day job, to make tasks easy. I don't want to be thinking, is this the correct encryption algorithm that my security team want? I just want to concentrate on my focused area. But naturally, things like multi-factor authentication, integration into things like SAML for single sign-on capabilities. If you don't want to remember multiple passwords for logging into remote support solutions, you just want to have a single identity across all of your applications and your products that you use on the help desk, then integration becomes a really key aspect. Firewall friendly. As a support representative, I used to hate it when I couldn't connect to a system. There was a firewall in the way, which was stopping the connection from taking place for me supporting someone. So the ability to have firewall-friendly architecture to support my users was absolutely key. Credential management, something that is hugely important and often overlooked. Okay, and there's two key aspects to this. The first is who is responsible for the passwords that we use day to day. And in the help desk, I know more than anyone that can mean hundreds, if not thousands of passwords that are in a spreadsheet, perhaps. Everybody has access to them, everybody knows them, and they're impossible to change moving forward. So that means they don't, which is not a good security posture. But what you can do is have a safe delivery of the credential for the help desk seamlessly, so they never have to know or care what the password is. But when they connect to a system, you can simply and easily inject the password or use that password within a session, and all of that information is audited. Now, what we're going to do is put a tick in the box for a security aspect of our product moving forward with the audit. What I'm going to do in the later slides, as we start to talk about things like productivity later on in the presentation, we can use those audit trails in some really positive ways. We can look at adoption. Now, adoption for me is one of the biggest challenges any organization faces when looking at a remote support solution. There are two types of adoption that we typically see. One is adoption from the team that you're working in, and the second is the adoption of the business. Okay, the team who are going to be using the solution have to want to use that solution. They have to see the value. They have to want to deep dive into the product. So things like reliability is going to be important. Time to value is going to be important. People don't want to have to spend ages implementing the solution to really be able to start to see value day to day. Things like, can I simply get into a session? Can I simply connect to a device without having to, create our own problems and challenges? From the business side of things, and there'll probably be some laughs and some nods of heads who have tried to request budget from the business, is often a lack of support for innovation. Now, I don't mean that negatively, but what I do see is this is not a priority today. Or, what's wrong with the tools you have today? You seem to be doing a good job. But when we start to think about continual service improvements and looking at first call resolutions and thinking about how we can improve service for our customers or for the end users who we're providing support for. Having support for innovation from the business will mean you have support for innovation from your teams and how you can deliver that back. So, consistently we're hearing at various SDI shows that we attend that processes are being updated, procedures are being simplified. So why should that be any different when you're thinking about a remote support solution? There's often a resistance to learning that we've seen. I don't want to change from the tool that I have today. So we have an obligation to each other to say, well, actually, do you know why? Here's why you want to change, is because it's going to make your life easy. I remember going through a migration process from one remote support tool to the other. And they didn't do a particularly good job of telling us why we were moving. They simply said it's because we're buying a new product, and that wasn't a good enough reason. We needed to see immediately why we're changing. What's the performance implications going to be? Am I going to prefer the user interface? All of these things will create good culture and good marketing within the team that ultimately makes us want to use the solution. So adoption is going to be huge. This is very much feature-based, okay? So the thought or the concept of optimizing chat. Now, many organizations, higher education is one specifically that springs to my mind, is I want to use chat. I want to implement chats. Perhaps you want to move away from one-to-one phone calls. Maybe you want to move away from that walk-up support process that you have. And what better way to do that than to look at the optimization of using chat? I'll give you a really good example. I was renewing my car insurance the other day. I was onto the organization who I renewed my car insurance through. I did everything through chat. It was absolutely excellent. I didn't have to pick up the phone. I was able to stay productive and do other things whilst in a chat session. And it was just dead simple and easy to use. So that was for me, for an end user experience, which was absolutely great. But from the business who are providing that chat service, they get immediate benefit from that. Our customers on average have told us that chat costs around 30% less per incident than phone support does. Dead simple. The reason for that is because of the relationships you have with the device. Phone support is typically one-to-one, whereas chat, there's no right or wrong answer for this, but can be something like 1 to 3. So an individual can have maybe 3 chat sessions open with any one given person, providing efficient support at any one given time. The other benefit to that can be things like it's easy to start a session, with things like HTML5 through various web browsers. It can be as simple as click on a button and that takes you straight into a chat session with the correct person based on things like skills-based routing. Now, the idea of skills-based routing is dead simple. This particular individual who works in the help desk, or these set of individuals who work on the help desk, have these skills. They're able to deal with these particular challenges. So you can route the sessions to the correct person in the first instance. I think all the time to when I used phone support, and you would have to speak to 5 people before you got through to the right department to receive the support that you ultimately wanted. That can take time. There's a cost associated with that as well. And most importantly, we have to understand that chat cannot always solve the issue. So the ability to move from chat into a full remote support session is also hugely important. We don't want to lose things like audit trails. We don't want to lose all of the data and the historic conversation or audit trail that we may have. So be able to migrate from a chat session into full remote support, where we might then need to benefit from some additional features, some additional functionality, or simply getting eyes on the problem, is particularly important as well. So organizations who optimize chat only see benefits. Something that has sprung to mind and is not present on this slide is as an additional tip is, how do I get chat off the mark? How do I promote this internally? And customers have told us the best way to do that is not to switch off phone support completely, but actually to market the benefits internally. Shout about what you're doing with chat, shout about the benefits, and create a hype and a buzz around why it's way easier to start a chat session from your desk than to walk halfway across a campus or walk halfway across a building to go and chat with someone. Other than getting the steps up on your Fitbit device or whatever that might be, there are all important benefits to having chat. This for me is kind of one tip that you can make an immediate change and see the best return on an investment. Okay, I would imagine that every single person on the line has some form of ITSM platform or some kind of ticketing system of some description. Okay, that's where you look after all of the assets. That's where you look after all of the configuration of those assets. You look after the change management, and you probably most importantly look after the incidents, the tickets that are being created on a day-to-day basis. Now, historically, I worked for an organization that did not have an integration initially into the remote support solution. So the process would be dead simple. If someone phoned the help desk, which I worked on, I answer the phone, I would have to create an incident. I would have to fill out the key areas within that incident. I would then have to ask some qualifying questions for that incident. I would have to then type up the notes, perhaps have a remote support session to assist that end user, type up the notes or copy and paste the notes of that session, and then close the incident or escalate or take the next step, the next action from that point. Okay, so if we think about the job that I was hired to do, which was to support end users, and the majority of people on this call, that's where their level of expertise is, and that's the value that they add to the business. They're spending all of their time, we're spending all of our time typing up notes, which is, not productive. It doesn't improve customer satisfaction, and it doesn't improve on the huge amounts of call and ticket volume that we have, which is ultimately what we want to try and reduce. So by integrating, say, remote support into your ticketing system, the benefits immediately are you never have to type up notes again. Think of a concept where you can connect to a system, whether it's through chats or whether it's through screen sharing, remote support. Everything is captured. If you transfer a file, if you launch an application, if you run a certain feature or function, all of that is captured, video recorded, and then at the end of the session, once you fix that issue, it's automatically handled for you. All of that information is pulled back against the incident. Let's say at that point, that's solved and saved maybe 10 minutes of time. By the time you've opened the ticket, you've logged all of the information. And if you're doing maybe, I know I was probably responsible back then for maybe 40, 50 incidents a day, and I saved 10 minutes per incident. You can see the value that just by making a very simple change, which is often free of charge as well in some instances, using kind of native APIs and integration that's available, you can pull all of that information back against a ticket without having to do anything. I know from the SDI shows in 2017 that we attended, one of the key kind of talking points was when something goes through an escalation, there's never enough information in the ticket. When it goes off to second line, to third line, to maybe a specialist, there's never enough information. Again, that whole challenge goes away because there's a video recording of the session, or there's a textual audit of everything that took place. So even through escalation, even through the more complex issues, we've got all of the information at our fingertips to ultimately provide a better service to the customer, to the end user. There are also other ways of leveraging those things. Creating knowledge base is also a huge way of moving issues away from ultimately getting to support or getting to an individual on the help desk through self-solving challenges. We've had a lot of customers who have spent huge amounts of time vested in creating knowledge base with some video content and some annotations, so that if we use chat as an example, when someone comes into chat and they give you their default, I have this problem, they explain what the problem is, it's something that you've had 3, 4, 5 times that week, you can simply send them a video recording, say, here you go and self-solve your own problem. If at any point you need to ask a question, by all means come back. But even if you can move 10, 20, 30% of those incidents to knowledge base, to video recordings, to audit trail, and provide those through a simple channel like chat, you're going to see nothing but benefits there as well. And there are also lots of other integration types that you should be thinking about, and the security teams will be thinking about, things like security providers. So that's how do you log into the solution. You don't want to have lots of different usernames and passwords you have to remember. You just want to integrate with, say, Active Directory, for example. Identity management and credential vault, represented on the slide here, are they ultimately mean the passwords that you use when you connect to systems. It can be quite difficult to remember and manage those moving forward, and there are ways of ultimately improving that as well. Mobility. So here for me, it's dead simple. The landscape is changing. It's ever evolving day to day. We're having to support remote workers, bring your own devices. You're having to support any device, anywhere, on any network, cloud devices, in any environment, any browser, different baselines of operating systems. We have a huge amount of customers who have simply said, we save a huge amount of money not having to send someone to a particular site, even to get eyes on a physical issue, like something wasn't plugged into the server rack correctly, because I was able to connect to a mobile device and then use the camera on that mobile device to see a physical issue. Someone had plugged the router into the wrong ports on within the router. So there are lots of different ways in which you can improve mobility, but ultimately the landscape is changing. IoT is continually changing. The types of devices that we have to support are changing, and we need a solution that allows us to change and be equipped way before it even becomes a problem. So mobility is a really key area of focus. Collaboration as well is often something which can be quite challenging. I worked as a technical account manager for an organization for a long period of time. So the only time I ever spoke to anyone was when someone had a complex question, or they wanted me to see a complex issue or a challenge, or wanted to discuss something. And I would say, okay, yeah, no worries. I'm absolutely happy to get involved in this, but how do I connect to your system? And at that point, you would have a complete stumbling block, because they didn't know how to get us in. They didn't know how security wanted us to do it. We didn't want to use free tools. We didn't want to use that same shadow IT element that we spoke about negatively on the previous slide. So the challenge stops there. So the idea of being able to get someone externally to the business into session through something we call external representative invitation is hugely important. Think about the time when your business has had a severity 1 issue, or there is one taking place, and you need to get someone external into a system as quickly as possible. So things like collaboration through, say, the Bomgar solution allows you to absolutely do that. Some other key areas that I really enjoy and focus on is the concept of escalation, real-time collaboration between sessions. I often at Bomgar look at a particular challenge or look at a particular configuration and think, do you know what, I could really do with getting my colleague involved in this session to come and have a look, check over what I've done is correct. Simply invite them in with real-time collaboration. So bring someone into the session, have that 4-eyed principle where we can all look and watch and collaborate through solving a challenge, okay? That's naturally going to improve our first call resolutions. And we can share sessions with the experts, bring people in and help and solve challenges in the first instance. Where that's also really helpful is new starters. Maybe the turnover of staff within your support teams is a particular challenge where people are progressing and moving on from say first line support. So you're bringing new members of the team. We can invite them into sessions so that they can get hands-on, watch and visually become a part of solving the day-to-day challenges. So we can look at things like collaboration and actually start to leverage those through concepts such as collaboration. Efficiency. Okay, easy session initiation is something that you would have seen on almost every slide. Again, if we don't have something that's easy to use, our end users and our customers can adopt and get into session nice and easy, it's dead simple. They're going to continue to walk up to the help desk and ask for help, or they're going to continue to pick up the phone because in their eyes, they see it as much easier. So the ability to just click a button will improve the overall efficiencies of your end user. I often like to think about the concept of a predefined response as well. I know historically we kind of had our top 100 support questions that we got, whether it was password resets, whether it was, how do I do type questions. And what we did was we created a knowledge base of predefined responses so that when someone came into session through, say, chat, as an example, we had our knowledge base of responses, something that at Bomgar we call canned messaging, and I used to be able to click a button and off they go. So I could send them to a predefined message like, here is the step-by-step guide or step-by-step response or video recording of how you solve that problem. Okay, the knowledge base element of that as well. In terms of the efficiencies, however, that solves is that if I can spend more time fixing things such as the easier day-to-day elements of support, the password resets, the how do I do elements, what that does is it frees my support team up, or maybe the more senior members of the support team up, to actually spend time on the more complex challenges. Okay, they're able to be more efficient and more productive in spending their times and their elements on the more complex issues, or maybe even things like training, improving their knowledge of different operating systems and different device types. So that naturally has a better impact on the team as well. Again, I come back to the integration elements, consistency of workflow. Within service desk, within IT operations, within the help desk, we often see processes, procedures, workflows that we naturally try to implement, whether that's based off a framework or just conceptual ideas and experiences that we know have worked throughout our careers. We need to implement those same consistency of workflows through remote support, things like integration into ticketing systems, so that again we improve the overall efficiencies of the products and of our support service. And finally, our productivity will naturally improve based on all of these things. What you'll see, what you'll see or what you've seen throughout the presentation is how these aren't just 10 points that are completely individual to one another. By implementing one, naturally focusing improves the second, the third, the fourth. They all tie together to create a foundation of why remote support is more than just screen sharing, how it can be leveraged and integrated to create a solid foundation of how you can help improve the overall service that you provide, and none more so than the productivity of the department. I completely sympathize with IT help desk, with having to do more with often less resource, with less people than we would typically need. So improving productivity is a huge one. First call resolution. All of the previous tips and tricks that we've spoken about will improve first call resolution, none more so than things like canned scripts. Now, what I mean by a canned script is, let's say, for example, you've got some senior support engineers. They are creating some really cool, really complex scripts that solve particularly challenging issues for, say, a Windows operating system. Let's say it's PowerShell. Well, we need to make sure that they are delivered in a controlled way. So what we can do is we can make these scripts available to our more junior members of the team, perhaps maybe the first line support, but they're able to use those in a safe, audited and controlled way. So we naturally improve our first call resolution because they're able to fix more complex challenges at the first touch. And what that does is it now naturally means that our more senior support engineers are able to, again, concentrate their efforts on creating the content, creating training for the team. They're able to spend their time elsewhere, which naturally improves productivity. Escalation and collaboration. Again, I'm going to touch on this, but from a different angle. One thing that I really didn't enjoy when we're talking about the overall customer experience of a logged incident is when it went beyond my abilities. It went beyond my knowledge. Maybe I had to bring someone else into a session or into a ticket to help me out. So what I would do is I'd write up the notes. Typically, I wouldn't have done that very well because, you know, we're busy. We have to try and pick up the next incident, all of those things. I'd escalate it. It would sit in another queue, again, because they're busy. They're doing more with less. And then they'd have to reach back out to the customer or to the end user to try and, you know, solve that problem. It's a long process that can take place over days, and if someone is taken offline from their day-to-day work, there is a cost associated to that, and ultimately it's frustrating for the end user as well. So to be able to free up the time of the more senior support engineers, perhaps, so that they can spend more time on the escalations, or to be able to do that in real time, just creates a much more productive environment that allows people to flourish as well. You will naturally create a better customer satisfaction simply based off implementing some of these tips. If the end users want to be on the receiving end of support, no one wants to have a computer broken, but if the process when a computer breaks is a good one, it's easy to get support. When they do get support, you get the first call resolutions, you get a great interaction, which is ultimately what we want to create here. The customer satisfaction will naturally improve through that. And then all of this information, all of these tips, all of the data that we've collected, we ultimately then want to know how can we take these steps moving forward. So the idea of having a continual service improvement, but taken from the metrics and the data that Bomgar say creates in terms of the reporting information, the customer satisfaction information. We take all of that information and you guys do what you do best. You correlate that and then you implement continual service moving forward so that, again, your end users continue to get a better standard of support, but your teams, your individuals who are representing the support team get better training, they improve technically, and they get to grow with the team as well. So before I hand back over to Zoe and just kind of parting questions or parting comments from me, we completely understand that we can't jump in both feet first for adoption and for all of these things to be implemented successfully. You know, better planning, training is the best way to go about these things, but I really do hope that even just one change from your current processes today with regards to remote support, you can improve and take remote support from being more than just screen sharing and make it a business tool, a part of the process. Thanks, everyone.
Fantastic. Thanks so much, Scott. I really liked that actually, and loved going through those 10 points, kind of looking at it from all angles really, but ultimately, as you said at one point, you know, it's all about solving end users' challenges and making it as easy and efficient as we can really. So I think that's something that we can all, you know, we all have a common goal there. So questions then, if I can, and everyone listening, please do post your questions. We'll get through as many of them as we can. But first of all, let's start with this one. So Scott, if you had to choose and say, you know, the one best single change that could be made using remote support to see the best results, what would that be?
That's an easy one. Without fail, it would be integration into an ITSM platform. Once it's achieved, which is actually a very simple process from what I mean by that is the idea of actually performing the integration, so the configuration and the steps taken to achieve that. Mm-hmm. The value that in the immediate impact that has on, you know, time saving, the workflow, the consistencies, all of the things that we've practiced and preached really throughout the slides and the tips there are second to none. I remember when we integrated the remote support solution in the previous organization that I worked for, it genuinely saved 10 minutes per session. So it's a real great change to make. Wow,
okay. Absolutely. And I mean, if we talked a bit about first time fix, and quite a few of your points fed into improving first time fix, what's your favorite method of improving that sort of with remote support?
For